Welcome everybody. In this video, we're going to talk about finding the zeros of a polynomial by factoring. Well, we're given this function f of x equals x squared plus 5x plus 6, and we're asked to find the zeros by factoring. Well, what are the zeros? If you remember, the zeros are the values of x that make the entire function 0. So instead of having f of x here, let's replace it with 0, because we want to know what values of x make this entire function 0. So we're just going to rewrite our polynomial here, but now we've just set it equal to 0. So the way that we can solve this is by factoring. So if we factor this polynomial here, remember we got to set up our two sets of binomials here and figure out which two binomials multiply together to give us this original polynomial. So if we think about this, remember in the front we have x and x. That's how we get our first term of x squared. But what goes in the back end of these binomials? Well, we need to find two numbers that multiply to give us 6, but when we add them, give us 5. So if we list out our factors of 6 over here, we have 6 and 1, and we have 2 and 3. Both of these multiply to give us 6, but which two add up to give us 5? Well, we know 2 plus 3 gives us 5. So we know on the back end of our binomials here, we have a positive 2 and a positive 3. And those are equal to 0. So remember that these are equivalent. This x plus 2 times x plus 3 is equivalent to x squared plus 5x plus 6. We've just changed this to one binomial times another binomial. I encourage you, after you do factor, to multiply this back out to make sure that you factored it correctly, that it matches the original polynomial, just to be sure. So once we have at this step, we have this factor times this factor now equals 0. Well, if we think about this, we use something here called the zero product property. And it essentially says in order for this times this to equal 0, either x plus 2 has to be equal to 0 or x plus 3 has to be equal to 0. Well, that's easy enough. Let's just set each one equal to 0. So if we have x plus 2 equals to 0, and we solve for x, we just subtract 2 from both sides. That gives us x equals negative 2. And if we set x plus 3 equal to 0 and solve for x, we subtract 3 on both sides, and then we have x equals negative 3. And those are our zeros. If we plugged in negative 2 or negative 3 into this original polynomial, the entire function would equal 0. So our zeros of this function are x equals negative 2 and x equals negative 3.